Bob, do you know who Anna Wintour is?
I know she's involved in fashion.
So
That's
she,
about all I've got.
I'm pretty sure she's the editor-in-chief at Vogue. And
Okay.
so they work in the same, she works in the same building that I work in. And
Oh, okay.
when I first moved to this building, I work in One World Trade. When I first moved to this
Oh, wow.
building, my boss was like, I just saw Anna Wintour in the elevator bank. And I was like, cool. I don't really know who she is. And she was like, you, come on, you know, she's editor-in-chief at Vogue. Like, if you saw her, you would recognize her. And I was like, I don't know that I would. And today, when I got to work, I was in the elevator and she was in the elevator with me. And you know what? You can totally tell who she is. And
Okay.
she's like not someone who I like knew of as a like famous, important person, but like she's one of those people when you're like, you know, in an elevator with them, like you can sense that there is an air of like significance around them,
Right.
which is pretty cool. And then I saw someone else today. I had another, I guess what we could call celebrity sighting, but I'm forgetting who it was. So they may not have been that famous, but these
You're
are,
gonna think of it later, and we're gonna be like, how could you forget
yeah. How could I?
so and so?
I remember seeing them and thinking like, wow, this is a name that like 3 people who I know would be excited to hear. So I didn't text anyone or like write it down. And now I'm forgetting the person. So maybe they couldn't have been all that famous.
Oh, that famous.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, we're just running into celebrities right and left in Gray, Maine.
Yeah.
No. No.
At the grocery store.
Yeah. There's nobody of importance comes to Gray.
I wouldn't say nobody.
Maybe through Gray on the way to like a casino or something, but
you're there.
Yeah.
So that's something of significance and importance. You're a celeb.
Yeah. For a certain level. I'm right down there. What's the Simpsons quote? I'm like grade Z meat, mostly circus animals, some filler. Yeah. That's where I am.
Guy, but I'm sure there are people at the farmer's market who are like, damn, that's Bob from ScreenAge Wasteland.
Nope. I think there are people in town who are like, who's that with Maureen Mitchell, who's my wife? Because she works for the school system. So
oh, okay. So she's big time.
Yeah.
If people were in elevators with her,
they'd be like, oh,
ooh, she's someone. Nice.
You're in New York City, so it's like
there's usually someone. Yeah. But she certainly has a vibe to her. I don't know if she listens to the show, but Anna, if you're listening, your outfit today was on point. Absolutely stunning.
That would be hilarious if she did listen to the show, though.
If she's like randomly a huge fan of ScreenAge Wasteland and you know the Canon, that you never know. You never know.
Yeah. I have no intention to judge our audience. There are probably lots of different people out there.
So many different people. I wish the other person who I saw today, I wish I could remember who it was. Maybe it'll come to me. But we're not here to talk about people who we bump into on the streets or anything like that, or in elevators. I did think about farting in the elevator with her, but there were so many other people, you know, just because like it would be a funny story to be like, I farted in the elevator with XYZ famous person. But there were too many other people. So I didn't. But although
not embarrassing to fart in front of Anna Wintour, but random strangers. Yeah. No.
Honestly, probably better to fart when there are like, you know, 8 of us in an elevator, because then it's like, who could have done that? As opposed to if it's just me and her, and it's like, well, obviously I'm the one who farted.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know how we move on from this.
I did. Yeah, I'm like, you know, I'm interested to see where he goes.
Yeah, I have no way of of transitioning from that conversation to the conversation that we should be having about the bridge on the River Kwai, which is our essential movie for today. You heroically stepped in last minute, as you often do when we need someone to step up to the plate and talk about a movie when there are no other brave souls who want to talk about various
Right.
essential movies that we have to talk about here. So, Bob,
Right.
welcome back. Thanks for joining. I think this is your first official episode of season 5. Is that
I think
correct?
I feel like we did something else,
There was
but it might have
something
been
else.
just maybe it was just the intro.
No, there was another one that I'm totally blanking on, but it was a
It
great
was it
movie.
was wicked early on
Yeah, and we
in the
had
season.
an amazing conversation with Hannah Loomis of the What a Picture
Oh yeah,
podcast.
yeah. Oh yes.
Oh my god.
What the heck was that?
Very hazy memories for the two of us today.
Yeah, we're both. You're just in from day job. I'm in from mind numbing medication. We'll blame it on that. What was that?
What?
We did. It was a really great conversation too, and I remember this
Yeah,
tone of the discussion more than the meat of the
the
discussion, which I
Maltese
hope.
Falcon.
Yes,
There we go. We
that's
got
it.
to it. Amazing.
Yes,
So this is yeah, that was like the third episode or something. And now we're like third from the last, fourth to last episode of the season, just of the season, not fourth to last ever. We're still
right.
cranking out episodes about essential movies,
Yeah.
including The Bridge on the River Kwai, which we're going to talk about today with Bob. But Bob, before we do that, how are you doing? What's going on?
You-
It's been a while.
Doing all right. Actually, it's been a weird spring. I think that's been weird for everybody, but uh, doing all right. I don't know, just chugging along. You could think of a million things until somebody asks you what you've been up to, and then you're like,
Mm-hmm.
mowed the lawn.
Yeah.
You know.
You're still cranking out Fear Flashback Fridays, which we all love.
Yes. Yep.
It
Yep.
is
And I saw your conversation with Val about
Passion of Joan of Arc.
Passion of Joan of Arc. Yeah, you were like trying to hand out my job there, man. What was going on with
Yeah.
that?
She's
I
coming for
mean,
your
I'll
stuff.
swap off. I'll swap off with Val, no
Yeah.
problem. She's great.
No, she's very happy to leave it with you, the master of Fear Flashback Friday, which we do
Right?
love here at the Wasteland. But we're not talking about a horror movie today.
No.
But we are celebrating. We just kicked off the Action Month at ScreenAge
Yes.
Wasteland, and I think we can kind of say that this is an action movie.
Yeah, I think so. There are elements. There are sections of it that are very action movie. So
It's a war movie, so we kind of often think of, or it's a version of a war movie, and we often think of war
yeah,
movies as being action movies in some way, shape, or form. So there's that. I think we can say that you know, that we're celebrating ScreenAge Wasteland Action Month with The Bridge on the River Kwai. But Bob, to get into the movie itself, I was
yes,
reading the Canon entry on the website for this that RJ wrote, which is great, and everyone should check it out if they haven't already. But you did
definitely.
a "What This Movie Means to Us" blurb, and you mentioned in that blurb that you watched this movie at a pretty young age with your grandfather, who fought in World War II.
Yeah.
So I was just really interested to hear if you had anything else about like what that was like. I feel like that's got to be like a wild way to watch movies with someone who fought in World War II and like watching World War II movies with them. Did he fight in the Pacific or did he fight in Europe?
Yeah, he actually fought in Europe. He was a bombardier. So he flew missions over Europe, also flew missions over the coast of the United States looking for submarines, that sort of thing. But yeah, he was extremely young when he went. I have pictures, actually, my Facebook profile picture is of him getting a medal, and he looks almost exactly like I did at his age.
Oh wow.
So that's one of the reasons why that I have it up there. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's he did not talk a lot about his time during the war, but the few times that he did talk about it are indelibly burned in my little kid brain. because
Mm-hmm.
I'd never heard, anything like those stories. But he was kind of a taciturn man. He was
Mm-hmm.
probably the best human being I've ever met. He's one of those people that just everybody respected. He was the town sheriff at one point,
Mm-hmm.
and died fairly young from a heart attack. So that also cemented him kind of as a hero in my mind. But we didn't share a lot in common. But one of the things we did love was movies,
Mm-hmm.
and he was also a big Star Trek fan, which is awesome. But because he wouldn't talk as much about the war as I would have liked him to, um, when we would have those moments where there would be a World War II movie on, and he would sit and watch it, and I would get to sit and watch it with him, it felt like a shared experience where at least I got some information, if not information, but just kind of a feeling like I knew him a little bit better
Mm-hmm.
from that experience. And very very different. Bridge on the River Kwai is very much a Pacific theater film, and even more specifically Southeast Asia film.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was still one of the ones I distinctly remember watching with him, and being able to have that time with my grandfather. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. I feel
No problem.
like,
I'm actually another complete aside. I'm sorry about that, but I'm actually named after his best friend in World War II, who was a tail gunner.
oh
Um,
wow.
I'm a junior, so my dad actually was named after him. But he did tell me the story about his friend who was a tail gunner,
Yeah.
and of course my grandfather was the bombardier. And one day they were doing a bombing run, and his job was after they flew over the target and he dropped the bombs, he had to run back to the tail section because they would immediately get swarmed with fighters that
Mm-hmm.
would be trying to shoot him down. And his job was to clear all of the shells away from the machine gun that his best friend was firing.
Yeah.
And the story that I remember is that one day they did their run, and he ran back towards the end of the plane to clear the shells, and he could feel a breeze coming from the back of the plane, which is bad news
Mm-hmm.
in a airplane at any. And he got there, and a fighter had blown the entire end of the plane off. His friend was cut in half, basically.
Oh no.
And yeah, so I'm like 5
Mm-hmm.
hearing this story on the floor of the garage, out there going.
Yeah.
but but that was like one of the rare. Mostly he told stories about things like, oh, there's an enemy submarine, we got to get over it, we got to take it out,
Mm-hmm.
dropping the bomb, blood and guts everywhere, and oh no, we've bombed a whale. Those kind of stories were easier for a young me to take, but
Yeah.
they
Instead
were
of
all,
like
yeah.
the dude who you were named after is, was taken out and he's
Yeah.
essentially sliced in half. Wow.
Yeah.
That's heavy stuff. But, you
Yeah.
know, thinking about this movie and just like movies in general and what they mean to like people and how they help us connect and all that stuff. Like oftentimes we're talking about why these movies are essential on like a macro level, like what they mean in like the history of cinema. But it is also important to understand like what they mean on like those micro levels and how understanding like you watching this movie with your grandfather and like having that connection point to him and his experiences in the war is like part of what makes these movies essential also on the macro level, is because there's probably so many other people who like you and your grandfather were able to like build like really cool aspects and parts of their relationships because and like through movies, which is pretty awesome, I would say.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. Agreed.
this The movie itself is also very awesome. So there's that. But again, I'm happy that we got to start with that story of you and your grandfather, and you watching this at a young age, and like being able to use that to to connect with
Yeah.
him. So as a what, like 10-year-old, 7-year-old, when you were first watching this,
Yeah, it
um
was probably 8 or 9. Yeah, something like that. It was on cable.
were there were
War
there any
movies were always on cable at that point in time. So
hell yeah. Were there any big takeaways that you 8 or 9-year-old Bob had, or was it not until you like revisited this movie later in life that you were like that you had some like thoughts about like what makes this movie great?
uh, honestly, at that age, my takeaways were, one, that whistling song was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You know, I vaguely remember trying to whistle that song for a couple of days afterwards. Um, that apparently, and this was something that I learned from every movie that was set in the jungle in the 1970s and 80s. If you lived in the jungle long enough, everything turns brown.
Hmm.
All your clothes, everything just turns that same shade of like khaki, I
Yeah.
guess. And that the end sequence blowing up the bridge was the best part for me as a kid.
Yeah.
You know,
Is
so
that still true for adult Bob?
well, it's weird because it's such a almost it's the blowing up of the bridge is almost anticlimactic in some ways to
Hmm.
me, because it's the realization that Alec Guinness's character comes so late in the day
Yeah.
that that it, I almost wanted him to fail at destroying the bridge that he built. And I'm sorry if I'm spoiling this for anyone, but that's how the movie ends. So uh, yeah, I'm not sure what the things that I got from the movie, the moments that impacted me more this particular watch,
Mhm.
are actually the moments uh, with Nicholson and Saito
Yeah.
having their struggle and the war that they engage in, and the capitulation that Saito goes through, and that friendship that develops. So that whole thing was my takeaway this time. And the explosion was, I was like, the general did it better.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
We've
a
seen this.
horrible thing to think about, but yeah.
Buster Keaton already did this bit.
Yep.
But yeah, I guess we can talk a little bit about the relationship between those two characters, because that does feel like it is the entire central plot and like essence of the movie. Obviously there are other things going on around that we'll talk about, but yeah, that like whole like power struggle, these two pretty stubborn guys representing two pretty stubborn cultures, and how
Right.
that is like playing out within the context of war is a really, really, really fun thing to explore. I'm going to quickly throw our good friend Sailor Monsoon. I almost called him Sailor the Monsoon. I'm going to quickly throw Sailor Monsoon under the bus, because I reached out to him to see if he wanted to join for this. And he was like, I don't like that movie. All it is I don't want to build a bridge. And then I do want to build a bridge. And then, oops, my bridge blew up. And I think reducing this movie to just that is like such a disservice to everything that is being explored here thematically, especially with those two characters. So
Yeah.
yeah, what do you think about like the two of them, and like how it is that their sort of like power dynamic struggle is going on throughout the whole movie?
Well, I love what you said about how they're from two very kind of proud cultures,
Hmm.
and it's that conflict between, the stiff British upper lip, everything's got to be just so, and that the way of Bushido and pride
Hmm.
is more important than life. Uh, Japanese way of doing things was, they have so much in common, and I think that ends up being, how they that find that common ground. But that struggle between them, that you can't say that it's an encapsulation of the war as a whole, but it's an
Hmm.
encapsulation of this moment within it. And it really is the heart. That struggle is the heart of this movie, to the point where, honestly, this watching it this time around, everything with William Holden's character, Shears, and
Yeah.
their it almost felt like a distraction. Like I was like, I kind of want to fast forward through this part to find out
Yeah.
how's the bridge going. Uh, yeah, and that I can't remember. There's the moment with the doctor.
Hmm.
Uh, what's his name? Clipton.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and he's
Yeah.
played by a guy I know from other movies like Quatermass in the Pit, actually. But where he talks to both of them, and they're both like, that other guy is crazy.
Hmm.
He's mad, and they're both freaking crazy.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I'm just rambling on about this, but that struggle. And what hit me the hardest this particular time around was the day that they're celebrating victory, Japan's victory over Russia Day, from like
Hmm.
1903 or whatever it is the day that Saito capitulates and lets out, couches it in the, I'm granting clemency, and the officers are allowed to rejoin the men and everything. And everybody goes crazy. And I have thoughts about that we can talk about later.
Yeah. No,
But
talk about it now. What are your thoughts
well,
on
well,
that whole?
I want to fall on Saito's side in this whole thing. With the whole thing is, the men are celebrating the fact that the officers don't have to do work. Boggles my mind. He's right. He's right. That's lunacy, but
Hmm.
whatever. But that moment of celebration for them, we have a quick cut back to Saito on his knees in his bedroom, sobbing because he knows he's lost. That's the end of the war for him, one
Hmm.
way or another. That he's actually capitulated in the only way that really matters in this area that he's supposed to have control over. And I love that moment. I'd written a note down, and it was just uh, that the actor who plays Saito should have won an Oscar, and maybe he did. I don't
I think
know.
he was nominated, and I
He
think
was
that
nominated
was
for Best Supporting, right? Yeah.
yeah, he was nominated for best supporting, and that was the one nomination that they didn't win. Swept everything else.
Yeah.
This cleaned up, won best picture, best director, best adapted screenplay, best editing, best score. Alec Guinness won for best actor in a leading role. Like
Yep.
Sessue Hayakawa is the dude who played Saito, and he's the only one who didn't win, but totally deserving of an Oscar for that.
Yeah.
And I think it was interesting watching this, and you're like, okay, a American production of like kind of a British, like what is essentially a British story, but also featuring Japanese characters from 1957 set in the Pacific Theater. Like we are going to get some like really troubling portrayals and depictions of Japanese people. And surprisingly, like Saito like is given a lot of depth as a character, which obviously makes the whole like dynamic and struggle with the Nicholson character, the Alex Guinness character, like so much better. Like it doesn't work if it's just like, oh, like the Japanese are monsters and they're being so mean to like these poor British guys. Like
Right.
otherwise it doesn't work. So you were talking about before, you're talking about maybe like wanting to side with the Saito character, and that made me think like, is there a hero in this story, or is it just a story about like guys in war kind of sucking?
That's a good question. You know, all the only person, well, there are two people who have relatively level heads, and one is Shearer, who really is just like trying to survive the war,
Hmm.
and he's seen heroes and they all die, and when he has to be one, same thing happens to him. So it's not a movie that rewards heroes in any way, shape, or form.
Hmm.
And then you've got the doctor, Clifton, who is the only one that sees things relatively clearly on both sides, trying to explain to Saito how he's the one that saves all of the officers at the beginning by saying, you're you can't just do what you want. There are so many people who will see this and you'll be taken to task at the end of the war, because the war is going to end at some point. And then, he gets the last word in the film anyway, and that word is madness. You know, he's just commenting on the whole war, and I think he's also commenting. Nobody who tries to be a hero in this movie survives.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
think the movie is a comment on that too. Yeah.
there's no hero, there's really no like sides taken. It really is just about how war can easily drive people to madness, and kind of like, Cheers philosophy, the best thing you could do is just like try to survive. That's
Yeah.
really the best thing that you can do. We spoke about Dunkirk a couple of weeks ago on the show, and that movie as a war movie is kind of about the same thing, where it's really just like all you can do is survive, because war sucks ass and it's not fun, and like trying to present it in some sort of like wrapped up version of nobility or whatever is just gonna drive you to madness, as we see with Nicholson and Saito, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think the scene where Nicholson is like constantly referring to the Geneva Convention rules about
Right.
like engagement, and like officers aren't allowed to like do physical labor within when they're prisoners of war. And I think Saito says, you keep referring to rules like this is war. This isn't a game of cricket. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's it's so there, like the movie is full of like so many like great moments like that, where um you just like it makes you take a step back and realize like, wow, like war as a whole is like pretty freaking dumb. It's
Yeah.
just like dumb guys being dumb and stubborn and stuck in their ways, and like creating these weird rules for like what sort of outcome we don't know. Like the whole goal here is for a bridge to be built to get supplies from like Thailand to like Singapore or something. Like I don't know, but like, which obviously like will then like create some sort of like tactical advantage in the whole scheme of the war. But it's to like boil it down to such a focused uh task, it makes you realize how silly like the whole thing is on a macro level. I don't know if you were buying that, or if I was just injecting my own like anti-war thoughts onto and projecting that onto the movie.
No, no, I think that's absolutely the case. And you're talking about how it's an American film starring a British cast, also written by a Frenchman.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
uh, there's a lot of angles on this thing, but I do think that the craziness of war, and nobody gets away from this clean. Everybody gets the finger pointed at them. The whole gung ho military, we've got to blow up the bridge to stop things. Those guys are not particularly heroic. They burned their best and brightest for maybe a 3 month break
Mhm.
in before they fix that bridge. Uh, they the the British, of course, have the stiff upper lip. I guess have to stop saying that. But the whole trying to hold on to this feeling that civilization and the trappings of civilization are more important than the trappings of humanity. I think Shearer has another great line where he says, "You guys are so concerned with dying by the rules when you should be concerned about living as a human being." You
Yeah.
know, and I think that's part of the message of this film too. Is and Saito and the Japanese, they live by the path of Bushido, the warrior way, but he'd have to kill himself because he didn't get a bridge built in time.
Seems a
Is
little
that
extreme.
right? Yeah. Is that the samurai code? It doesn't feel like heroic either. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
The thing with the Brits and the obsession with like civility or whatever and their duty to uphold civilization as they see it, and that being like the thing that the Nicholson character is like holding on to when he like decides that he does want the bridge built, that like
yeah,
he needs to show the world that like British ingenuity and like designing bridges and engineering bridges and constructing them and all of that stuff is something to be proud of, even if it means that he's giving an advantage to his enemies in the war. The idea that like it can showcase how great British people are is such a
yeah,
hilarious way to like show how silly all of these things can become when you get like super, when you have like extreme tunnel vision and you get way too focused in on one thing and you lose the forest for the trees or whatever, like he's
yeah,
so locked in on like, I have to show that British, that we're so capable and we can provide so much to the world, like the single bridge in Thailand, that it will show everyone that Brits are the best,
yeah,
even though it's going to
yeah,
result in British people dying at the hands of their, enemies in the war.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that conversation that Nichols has with Saito at the end, where they're both standing on the bridge, and he's basically he's saying, when you get to be a certain age, you start to wonder, what are you leaving behind? What did you do anything worthwhile? And and he's saying that as a human being, one person to another, but he's
Hmm.
also talking about the British Empire, right? So
Yeah.
at some point in time, the British Empire was well into its sunset,
Yeah.
and World War II was just putting dirt on that particular grave. And I think he's talking about, and the whole movie in a sense is about, we we were worthy of something. Our way of life was worth everything that we've had to endure since we were on top of the world. Even if even if this means the end, we still held our heads high and we did things by the book,
Yeah. By our book that
by
we
our book. Yeah,
that we wrote, and we
yeah,
must stick to this book. We can't
yeah,
deviate from it in any way, shape, or form.
yeah,
Yeah, man. It's so, thinking about that line and sort of like the legacy or whatever of the British Empire, and then thinking about really, I guess World War I and World War II, I think more so than any other wars, were really just like exercises in insane bravado from all of
yeah.
these different nations, and like needing to show that they have the technology and capabilities and arms to be able to do these things. Like that was like kind of the main point of World War I, and then like obviously that all
Right.
leads into World War II, where there was like really no like, there wasn't like a sense of like morality or like nobility that people were fighting for, like fighting about. It was really just like, we have these great big guns and we need to show everyone that we have these great big guns. We're
Right.
like, we can build the shit out of a bridge, and we need to show everyone that we can build the shit out of a bridge. And if that's all we're going to do, then damn it, we're going to do it. And it's just, yeah, it's a really interesting thing to like use as an exploration of war. Just this bridges happen all the time. There are bridges everywhere, but like within this context, the bridge can mean and represent so much more.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And uh, that that it's such a, I hate the term slippery slope, but when Nichols comes out of the box and he starts talking about getting the men back in shape, and they're doing a terrible job with this bridge and stuff, it starts off sounding reasonable. Like they're not doing good work and they're getting beaten for it and they're in worse condition and shape, and we have to give them something to strive for. And he's right in the sense that all of the men start looking healthier and they're in more disciplined shape and they're playing games and that sort of thing. So in that way, he's not wrong about this, but he loses sight of the purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's also the bridge. If you're like, the military will teach you how to have discipline and to be a stronger person and to work as a team and all of those good things. But if the purpose of the military that you're building is to create a bridge that we call war,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it just madness to do that as well? So, yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of things you can make out of this movie and out of their behaviors.
I love that idea of you like all that military stuff serving as a bridge to madness. Like the bridge as war leading us to madness, as opposed to just staying on the side that has all the discipline and um, all of those sort of like more positive things. I
Yeah.
guess.
Well, and I don't, before anybody starts in the comments going, you're anti-military and all of this stuff, the military is absolutely an important and essential part of our modern world. And I have uh, family members in the military, and I think that that soldiers are amazing people, but
Mhm.
they are often treated as tools and means to an end for things, especially in war.
Yeah.
That
Well, that's totally what's happening in this movie, right?
Yeah,
We don't really get to know any of the soldiers who are within this prisoner camp, right? The only
yeah,
characters who we are actually spending time with are the officers. And as we know, war is like these decisions made by people in these typically like closed off rooms that are very far away from like the actual action, and making decisions that will then impact the people who actually have to build the bridge. And like going back to the idea of whether or not officers need to take part in building the the bridge with the other prisoners, like the servicemen or whatever, is like such a hilariously snobbish thing to think. Like, how is that leadership? How is that you're the one who decided to surrender on behalf of these people, and now because of your decision you're going to allow them to endure like all of this back breaking pain to build a bridge, and you're not going to like be there with your people to like go through that pain and suffering with them. um Again, I don't know if like all this stuff is intentional or if it's just like how we end up reading it based on
right,
years of knowledge about war and stuff, but like that's the fact that that was such like a big thing for him, was not only to follow the rules but to follow a rule that like to someone like me seems so silly. Like, no, like you're a leader of these people. Get in the fucking trenches with them. Like that's what a leader does. A leader doesn't
right,
hold up a paper of the Geneva Convention and the rules,
right.
to like say over and over again that officers shouldn't be taking part in the manual labor that everyone else is. Um, but again, these are all just like a bunch of you know ways that we a bunch of different readings that we're applying to the movie that may or may not be the intention, but that's the
Right.
beautiful thing about movies that are as thematically rich as something like this, is that we can get a lot of different takeaways from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think you've been in the military. I certainly have not been in the military. So watching this with somebody who has military experience might be a completely different experience.
Yeah. and like
than
how they would read those decisions that are being made by Nichols and Saito and other the other sort of like name characters, and
yeah.
how it affects the hundreds of unnamed British soldiers that are the ones who are actually building the bridge.
So one complete, not an aside, but one of the things that struck me this time around was, of course, over the course of the movie, all the things that Saito asks him to do, have the officers work alongside the men, threatens to have the wounded work alongside the able men. All those things Nichols causes to happen of his own free will. And the movie, every time that happens, there's a cut to Saito going, "What's happening?" Like just looking
Yeah.
out the window, going, "Is this real life?"
Yeah.
So I love that Lean knew enough to point to Saito and go, all I had to do was let him do what he was
Yeah.
gonna do anyway, and I would have got everything I wanted.
Yeah. It's so funny. We do
Yeah,
have to circle back to Lean because as a
yeah.
director of this, yeah, a lot there. But one other quick thing, just to get us off the topic of theorizing about war. I think RJ had a section in her Canon write up that was about how like oppressively hot this movie is.
Oh
This
my
is an
god.
all time hot movie. What did you
Yeah.
think of that? And like I think they were shooting on location. They must have been, and like actually built the bridge, actually destroyed the bridge. But what did you think about just like how like oppressive this movie feels in terms of
Oh
the
my
heat?
god. Yeah. Just every shot feels like you can just feel the humidity coming off the screen. And another thing that I had noticed that I never noticed before was the insect noises are
Mm,
constant. And I was like, just having the insect noises makes my skin crawl a little bit. I could feel sweat start to pool underneath my armpits, and I was like, yeah, oh, you feel every
yeah,
second of that jungle, man. That is, and you know, Guinness deserved the Oscar for this. Coming out of that hot box, and that he just looked like a zombie. And I
yeah.
remember reading somewhere that stilted gait of like trying to maintain his being upright was based on his son's walk when he was recovering from polio. Like he
Wow.
wanted this kind of, he'd seen people in an extremis just trying to stay upright and be. So I thought that was amazing. But that you really feel that hot box that he's in, and everybody's covered in sweat. It's not a person that walks around doesn't have sweat on their back of their clothes or yeah, yeah.
One of the
It's hot.
hottest, sweatiest movies that we've seen.
Yep.
Up there with Predator, Top Gun.
I was thinking of Predator exactly right
Yeah.
then.
Very a very hot movie. With the insect noises that you were talking about, um, do you have any thoughts about what the movie is trying to say with the starting and ending with the birds flying around? Do you think there's anything to that other than just
I'm
a cool
almost
image?
certain there is, but I don't know what that would be. I mean, birds symbolize freedom um, in a lot of cultures, so it could be that.
Hmm.
Um, there's actually a scene about 2/3 of the way through when uh, uh, Shears and his crew first come across a Japanese patrol,
Hmm.
and they fire the mortar, and all those bats
Yeah.
just swarm the sky. And I was like, well, if I was reading symbolism, those bats just got to be the souls of all the people killed in this war, because they're covering the sky as these men fight for their lives.
Yeah.
Um,
creating like a
So
shadow over them.
yeah.
Yeah, they're like fighting in the
So,
shadow of these
and
lost
I mean,
souls.
it's like a freaking, Planet Earth BBC shot. Lean doesn't
Yeah,
do bad cinematography anyway. But that was like, I could see this in a documentary if it wasn't for the gunfire.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's that might come up in recommendations, and I
Oh,
will just leave it at that. But
okay.
you also spoke about the cinematography, which is great, shot in cinescope or cinemascope,
Yeah,
um,
CinemaScope. Yeah,
shot in cinemascope, absolutely wild, great landscape photography in this. Let's talk about David Lean a little bit as a director, because this sits in an interesting place in his career. Do you
yeah.
have anything for us about that? Him as a director, what this movie sort of means, like what that like epic photography and sort of epic scope of the story kind of means within like the context of his career, and yeah, just go on about all that.
You go on about all that like I've done any reading about it at all, which I have not. I vaguely have an awareness that this was like his breakout film.
Hmm.
Like this was all right. After this, David Lean gets to make David Lean movies.
Yeah,
You know, so we get Doctor Zhivago and holy crap,
Lawrence of Arabia.
Lawrence of Arabia is like that other World War II movie.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and I love those movies,
Hmm.
but for some reason, I just my whenever anybody goes, "Oh, David Lean," and I just have this memory of everything in super wide CinemaScope, vast vistas, and uh, the wreck of the British Empire. You know,
Yeah.
that's it seems like a lot of his films are about Brits trying to find their way in a world that's kind of leaving them behind a little bit.
Yeah.
Uh,
I came
so
across something that he also really wanted to make a movie about Gandhi, which very much so fits into
yeah,
that sort of realm of storytelling, which is an interesting thing for a Brit to want to grapple with. And
right,
like
yeah,
he tackles it in like a really not harsh, but like a pretty blunt kind of way. Like you think about other sort of texts that are like my mind immediately goes to like the like early versions of James Bond novels, which are trying to reconcile with like the fall of the British Empire and like their dominance globally, and like making sort of like giving way to like Americans and Russians as being like the new world order or whatever.
right,
And those are I think like more forgiving of Brits, and like a little like they're like feeling a little sorry for themselves, but like David Lee is like really just like he's like, yeah guys, it's over, it's done, and like
yeah,
kind of like laughing while talking about it.
yeah, yeah, and that he's a Brit himself is that you can see kind of Americans being like, all right, get over it, get over yourselves. We're the new kids in town, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But him kind of dealing with that on the big screen and showing the absurdity of trying to hold on to that is an interesting thing. But it's funny. I need to do more, watch more lean movies because I know
Mhm.
some of the people that I really like Ridley Scott, kind of worship him and how he made films, and you can see that in especially in Ridley Scott's films. But I don't know as much about him as I would like.
Yeah, I'll be totally honest and frank and say this is the only one of his movies that I've seen, but I did do some background reading, and based on what is sort of like known generally about the other those other movies and what they're about, and then also like hearing about the wanting to make a Gandhi movie, and what you were saying about how he's like tackling the fall of the British Empire, I thought was super interesting, and it's definitely something here. But also, like we were saying, he sort of like really finds his sort of directorial voice here, and I guess we can say, aesthetic, like the big, grand, epic, both in like the photography and like the scope of the storytelling, but also at the same time being extremely intimate. Like this movie is really just about those like two guys and their struggle, while
Yeah.
also being about all of these other big ideas and this like big grand story about a bridge that we get to blow up.
I know that the whole opening scene to me is an encapsulation of that, because uh, not the initial opening scene with the train and the crosses and the crew, but
Mhm.
when Nichols and his men come in, uh, and it's that whistling scene.
Mhm.
And I was watching it today and I'm like, oh crap, that's right. They're gonna let everybody walk in. They're not gonna cut and do like, all right, you get it. It's a bunch
Mhm.
of British. No, we're gonna see every single person come in while that goes. And then he starts doing the close-ups of their feet. You know, it's like we're coming in. We still have that British pride and joie de vivre almost. And
Mhm.
then he's like, but reality is this man has no shoes. This man's got one shoe and his other one's covered in mud. This, it's these people have already been through hell and they're pretending that they're not. So it is that the big picture of everybody.
Mhm.
And then, yes, but we got to deal with this too. So,
Yeah. It really, yeah, it like informs the rest of the movie that it's like this big thing, but it's also, we're also going to, hone in on the people specifically, and then like everything that we learn about these prisoners and like their situation from like a shot of their feet is a pretty insane thing to do.
yeah.
Quentin Tarantino wishes that he could have a foot shot that's that informative.
Well, yeah, but if it was Tarantino, they would all be in the scenes with the hot Thai girls who are helping Shearer and his crew
Yeah, and it would be their
get
feet
through
in
the
a totally
jungle.
creepy
Yeah,
way. Yeah, and not
exactly right.
in just
Yeah,
like
yeah,
exploring the narrative kind of way.
yeah.
The other interesting aspect of this movie, which I think we kind of spoke about a little bit, but we didn't get too far deep into, is the William Holden and Shears character of it all, which was like just added for the movie. It's not part of the book at all.
Right.
But I think you mentioned maybe earlier on that at points it felt like a distraction to the rest of the movie. But yeah, like why did you think that? Could you have done without it totally, or do you think that it had like any sort of value whatsoever?
Well, you know, it. The thing is that you probably do need it because otherwise, how does Nichols come to the realization that by creating this bridge, he's actually harmed his own side in the war? Uh, it's only by Shear's death that he gets woke and slapped awake. So you need that moment. But I almost feel like another director or a director that didn't have to take into account the fact that I don't think we have enough Americans in this American film, uh, could have made that a point where he just when the men show up to bomb the bridge, and he leads, have Nichols lead we've got to stop them, and when they
Hmm.
kill the men, it turns out to be this person that he knew, and that could have woken him up. So it
Yeah.
feels like all of this gung ho. He's the American guy, but they're also the British commandos,
Hmm.
and they're with the people are with them, and they're guiding them, and all of that just felt almost countertonal to the rest of
Yeah.
the film.
But I
So
guess
there's
it's
there are
sort of,
parts in it. Yeah, sorry.
yeah.
Go
It
ahead.
must have worked because this movie ended up grossing. It was like the
Holy
highest
crap.
grossing movie of the year. I think Holden was on the poster and he was like, he got top billing. I think it was mostly added to give like American audiences some sort of connection to the movie and like want to go see it, and then also I guess like feel comfortable watching it, because I guess not a lot of American audiences are down to watch a movie about the struggle between British and Japanese cultures through the eyes of Saito and Nichols. Like,
Right.
so there was
Yeah.
like, yeah, it could have been pared down a little bit. It felt countertonal, but in a lot of weird ways, like it was kind of a welcome sort of like relief from the rest of the movie. Like, okay, now we're just gonna go watch Holden be like hot and like just be like a hot dude in the jungle and like
Right.
have like Thai women flirting with him or whatever. Like, sure, I guess that's cool. Um,
That's all right. Yeah.
and if we're gonna be here for 2 hours and 40 minutes, like fine, 45 to 50 minutes of it can be just like hanging out with him, I guess. So yeah, I don't know. It's it I get it. It feels like if a similar decision were made in 2025, where like you have this movie that is like this like interesting, thoughtful examination of war, and then people are like, well, I don't get it. Why don't you put like um oh my god, why don't you put like Glenn Powell in it, and he's in it for like 50 minutes, and it's just like that 50 minutes is
Right.
just like an adventure movie with him before we go back to the serious stuff. It's like, well, no, we just want to watch the PTA war movie or whatever.
Right.
We don't want to watch
Yeah.
Glenn
Yeah.
Powell
Yeah.
run around. So like I wonder if people were having similar conversations in 57, or if they were just like, no, this kind of works for us, and like it's like you get your veggies, you're getting like candy mixed in with your veggies,
Yeah. No, I can see that. I can see that. Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
kind of
And
worked.
I know in the past I've been equally as interested in Shears and his whole shenanigans. It just for this particular, maybe because I had a time crunch to get it
Yeah.
done. I was like, this is not relevant to my interests.
Yeah, we can
I
fast
need
forward through
to,
all of this.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
Through
But
fast forward through him drinking martinis on the beach with
yeah,
a hot
and
date.
he's a really good actor. You know, I like watching
Mhm.
him on the screen. He's got a great voice, and the character is great. I actually missed having him in the mix in the camp when they
Yeah.
took him out. But yeah, that's probably
Yeah, it would
just
have been
being a
interesting to
stammer.
have him. Would have been really interesting to have him in the mix at the camp. Did you ever happen to hear who they originally wanted for that role? And they originally wanted someone else for is it Nichols or Nicholson? I was calling
It's
him Nicholson
Nichols.
before. It's
Nichols
Nichols.
for some reason. Yeah.
Um but yeah, they were thinking of different actors for Shears and Nichols. I don't know if you heard and want to
I
share.
knew that Alec Guinness was the fourth choice, and like
Yeah.
Lean wasn't shy about telling him that he was the fourth choice, which led to some friction. But I can't remember who were the oh
Charles Lawton.
Charles Lawton, which fantastic actor, but he's a little corpulent for being the
Yeah.
leader of a British
And it was his
army
idea to
people.
say that like he was like, I would not work in this role at all. Like I would not be able to convey what it is that's going on.
Yeah.
And a very different kind of actor. I think he would have been a bit more broad and like expressive in the way that he was playing it. And Alec Guinness is like doing like a lot of under the surface kind of madness while
Oh yeah.
presenting as being like put together, which I think makes the character like so much more compelling. But yeah, did you hear who they were originally thinking for the Shears character?
Was
Which
it
kind of
Cary Grant?
yeah,
Yeah, I vaguely remember hearing something about that. But Cary Grant, and
yeah,
I can actually absolutely see that, but the stuff that comes off as almost I don't know, laughing in the face of death with William Holden would have just been broad comedy with Cary Grant in that
yeah.
role, you know?
Back to
So
back weeks talking about movies where the original casting idea was Cary Grant, and we ended up with what I think is probably a better fit for the role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the 50s probably Cary Grant was in every conversation for a leading man role,
Yeah.
right?
Who would
I
that be
mean,
today? Like anytime there's there's anything, like the first
you
choices.
mentioned Powell. I'm sure that he's probably in a lot of
Yeah.
conversations right now because he can do this the straight man and the comedy. So
Yeah. Would have been a totally different movie, but we are happy with the version that we got.
yeah,
We also spoke a little bit about how this was originally written by a Frenchman, which adds a whole another layer of intrigue to the story and the way that it's presented. But apparently, he didn't actually write. I think he did the first pass at the script, and then it was rewritten by, I'm forgetting their names, two folks who were like on the blacklist, so they
yeah.
couldn't get credited. And then when this ended up winning best script, the original French author like accepted it, and he thought that the Oscar was for his book, not for the movie that was totally different from
Oh
his
no!
book. So just like
Oh dear!
a lot of funny stuff going on there with, like American Cold War politics and
Oh,
French
so
writers
stupid.
and the
Yep.
Oscars and stuff.
Oh yeah. And this is the second movie that's based on a novel by Pierre Boulle, right?
What's the other one?
Planet of the Apes.
Oh,
Yeah. So yeah, based on his novel Monkey Planet. So
interesting.
yeah. So and of course those are he wrote like 14 novels or whatever, but those are the
Mhm.
ones that everybody knows him for. So
Yeah. I think he fought in World War II, and I think he was in the Pacific Theater, and like a lot of this is based on like an experience that he saw of some like of a British captain or something
it's
who
I remember reading about this because there's like a brand new like this April in
Mhm,
Australia a new movie about the death train and
mhm,
the this whole track because it's all based roughly on real events. Not
mhm,
it's a conglomeration and mishmash of stuff, but Abul was a prisoner of war, did work on the on that area, but he was held by um, Vichy France collaborators. So
yeah.
he although he
Vichy
made it
France occupied Vietnam, I wanna say?
well, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So they were in that area and they worked with the Japanese because they were part of the Axis.
yeah,
So yeah, to him, he thought of Nichols as kind of a conglomeration of a bunch of different French collaborators that he'd seen. But of course, the British POWs were pretty pissed at the whole thing. Uh, the guy who was the actual leader of the British contingent that worked on the real bridge over the River Kwai, which was like the Milong River,
mhm,
I think it was the actual name of it. But uh, he watched the movie and was like, this was quite a good movie." And then he kept having like people he knew who were fellow prisoners of war coming up to him, going, "They did you dirty," and suddenly realized that, oh crap, people think this is me,
yeah,
and so there was quite a bit of pushback from the Burma contingent of the prisoners of war, and they weren't
mhm,
allowed to talk about it. So that was
interesting.
pretty crappy about for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, some kind of separate that would also make a pretty interesting movie is that like there were tons of just like essentially like slave labor from Southeast Asia that was used to
Oh yeah.
work on these on that death train, like by magnitudes more than there were prisoners of war from the Allied forces, and like 100,000 people died.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That was the number that was in my head too. That's just crazy.
Absolutely insane. Like,
Yeah.
we feel bad for the Brits, but then you think about like the scale of death that was happening elsewhere, and it just yeah, the whole thing is kind of wild.
Yeah.
Are you a big bridge guy? Do you like bridges?
I actually do like bridges. I'm not like super into the architecture or anything like that, but I've always enjoyed different kinds of bridges and grew up in an area of Maine where we used to jump off bridges regularly to go swimming. So,
Nice. To go swimming.
uh,
That's
yeah,
a good distinction.
yeah. The bridges in New York City, not good for that sort of thing.
No, no, not at all. I would not jump off any of the bridges in New York City, um, despite what some of my text messages say after
Oh.
Knicks losses. Um, yeah, bridges are dope. I'm assuming you knew that in the novel the bridge does not get blown up.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
What
Yep.
do you think of that decision to have the bridge blow up at the end of the movie? Does it feel like the right choice?
To me, it does because it's symbolic of all of this work, all of this effort, all of this death for what, for its destruction. I feel like it had to happen, and especially just as a moviegoer,
Hmm.
if all those people died, like if Nichols ended up falling down next to the
Not quite as
thing,
cinematic.
not quite as cinematic, unfortunately. I think I would have left the theater feeling pretty cheated.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
there's Chekhov's
going
plastic explosives on on that bridge. Come on. So,
going back to what you were saying about like the bridge as war and like it needing to, sort of be blown up at the end. It kind of really hammers home that idea of like the futility of war, just like
yeah,
how silly and pointless and dumb all of this can be. And like you see all this death and destruction, and it's like, for what? For a bridge that's going to get blown up at the end of the
yeah.
day. And then going back to the birds, I was thinking about like how like nature is always there, and in the middle you have humanity and all this stupid shit that we do, including war. We have all of these petty little arguments and disagreements and whatnot about bridges and so on and so forth. But like the natural is always going to be there, and there's like never a moment where people are like stopping to appreciate that or you know think about that. There's like the one scene, is it when Shears escapes and he like thinks that he sees a vulture and it's really just like a kite.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, which is I don't know what that means, but maybe there's something there. And now I'm just kind of rambling,
yeah.
and and thinking about what it could all mean.
That
And yeah,
symbolism of that. Yeah.
there's some symbolism there. And again, well, maybe I'm not going to bring it up in recommendations, but it made me think a lot about Terrence Malick's Thin Red Line, which is a movie that is interested in weaving like ideas about futility of war and like the natural world and our relationship to it and how it's always like kind of like clashing from moment to moment. But yeah, man, bridge on the River Kwai. I
Yeah.
almost went the whole episode
Over
without
is the
saying over.
novel. Yeah.
Over
So,
is the novel.
yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to call it over the whole time. Well, Bob, is there anything else about Bridge on the River Kwai that you wanted to talk about?
That's a good question. I wrote a bunch of notes, but I can't even. I'm not sure if there's anything that we haven't already talked about. Uh,
This is usually the point in the episode where we
yeah,
mention the score, where we talk about how we didn't talk about the score. But
right. which is that, and the score is incredible. The way that, oh God, who did the score? Malcolm Arnold, I think.
I can't remember.
I think it was Malcolm Arnold, and it won an Oscar too, right? So, but the
Hmm.
way he incorporated the the whistle, the march,
Hmm.
into the music was just genius. I thought that was incredibly well
Yeah.
done. And that whistle apparently was, the story is anyway, that
Hmm.
that Lean was just yelling at the extras because they could not keep in step.
Hmm.
and they're supposed to be military men marching,
Yeah.
and so he told them to like start singing a song or whistling or something that lets you keep time. And there was a guy that was a professional whistler,
Oh wow, I didn't know that was a
and
profession.
yeah, and he just started that piece of music, which I can't remember the name of it. It's like the Bogey March,
Something bogey
something like
march.
that.
Yeah, March bogey. Yeah.
And everybody knew it, so they were able to do it, and it became an iconic moment in the film. So I love
Yeah.
when it's a huge part of the movie, and it's just sort of something that grew organically out of a need to get the extras in line, you know.
Yeah. Adds to like the whole myth of the movie
Yeah,
as a whole. So good. Such a great movie. I had not seen this before, so
that's
again,
awesome.
been saying it a lot this season in particular of the canon that we're watching a lot of movies that I've not seen. So it's been a pleasure and a blast getting to know some of these, essential movies and forcing myself to watch it because that's the whole point of the list is
Yeah,
to
yeah,
get people to watch these great movies that inform so much of what we know about movies in general and why it makes us like helps us to realize why it is that we love movies and why we love the movies that we do love, so on and so forth. So very fun time. Bobby, I don't know why I said Bob you. Bob, thank you as always for for joining. Um,
always great to come and talk to you about this stuff. It's fascinating and
Always a
awesome.
pleasure.
So,
Yeah, such a fun conversation. Before we get out of here, let's do a couple of recommendations for Bridge on the River Kwai. So we'll each recommend three things. At least one has to be another movie. The other two things, any and everything else, more movies, TV shows, books, music, board games, video games, all that good stuff. Any movies you recommend can't be in the canon. And I'll let you go first. Give us your first recommendation, and then we'll go back and forth.
all right, I literally was writing this in the 10-minute break that you gave me before we started because I was like, I have no idea all of the war movies I can think of. Uh, But anyway, we'll start. We'll start randomly. I don't think this movie is in the canon, but it was
Hmm.
the most recent war movie that I saw that made me feel like I was there, like feeling the futility and also just the impact of the war viscerally.
Hmm.
And that was 1917.
Mm.
And I've had it on my list to watch forever. And my wife and I actually just watched it earlier this year. And I was
Nice.
like, why did I wait so freaking long? This is an amazing piece of cinema. And it made me feel like I was in there
Yeah.
with those characters, with that character in particular. And it was peculiarly British as well.
Yeah.
And like one of the things is one of the most affecting moments was also one of the most like what the hell moments was when they had the kids singing, basically soprano in the middle of the
Yeah.
forest before going into battle, and they're all just sitting there basically dumbstruck by the beauty
Yeah.
of this kid's song. And I'm like, fellas, you going to war, you
Yeah.
guys are all gonna die. Yeah. But it was both beautiful and like, do you really have time for this? But
Yeah.
if you're British, yes you do, and tea
Of course
later
you
as
do.
well.
Yeah. That movie's wild. It very much so drops you in and is
Yeah,
uniquely British, which I kind of love. I love getting a sense of like how the Brits in particular sort of like think about the war. It is, I mean, the one good thing about World War II is that it gave us a lot of good art. It
it's
was like
true.
the
Yeah,
crappiest thing to happen to the globe, but you know, then like caused everyone to think about so much and like it is interesting like going through. Although I think that's a World War One movie, yeah.
it
But
is
just like
World War
going
One.
through
Yeah,
and thinking about how people like from different parts of the globe are like thinking about contextualizing, relating to the same global event. I should stop
Yeah.
rambling.
No, but I totally, your brain starts going, well, would Italian cinema be what it was to the world if it hadn't been for World War II? Do you
Yeah,
get bicycle thieves without World
yeah,
War II? I don't know.
yeah. World
So,
War II sucked, but silver lining, we got
yeah,
bicycle thieves.
yeah.
So,
And Godzilla.
and Godzilla. And Bridge on the River Kwai.
And Bridge on
Um,
the River Kwai.
my first recommendation is going to be a TV show that I have not finished, but intend on finishing at some point. But it is very much so about the clashing, stubborn nature of East and West and what happens when they meet, particularly when they meet in the East. When the West comes to the East and they're like, hey, here's how we do things. And you guys got to, bend towards us and how we do things over in Europe. And the Japanese are like, no, screw you. Like, here's
Yeah.
how we do things here. Like, kiss my ass. And that show is Shogun.
Yeah.
I got to
I
finish
have
it.
not yet seen the new version of Shogun.
Yeah. I've not read the book either, but from the first couple episodes, I dug it. There's
Nice.
there's some interesting stuff, and I do think that whole the whole idea of just like seeing how East and West clash, and
Yeah.
like we said, Japanese culture can in many ways be pretty stubborn and set in its ways, as can a lot of different European cultures, whether it be English or in this case, like I think Portuguese. Yeah, everyone can
Right.
just be super set in their ways, and
Yeah.
it causes interesting tension to watch play out on screen.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome. That's on my list as well. Not this list, but list of stuff to watch. So
nice.
cool. Excellent. So my stuff as is my want just gets more random as I go.
Yes.
This particular one was I was thinking about Japanese culture and Japanese culture after World War II, and how Godzilla was in particular a kind of reaction to the events of World War II, very specific events. But rather than go with one of the movies, I wanted to highlight a comic book series, a comic book called Godzilla: The Half Century War.
Hmm.
It's I can't remember the name of the artist. I've got the book right here. James Stokey, actually. There's the book right there.
Nice.
And it's basically a story about a guy who fought in World War II and went back home to Japan, and then Godzilla attacks, and somehow he is around for the next 50 years of Godzilla. So they go through pretty much all of the Godzilla uh, up to the 70s movies,
Mm-hmm.
I think. And it's the point of view of the grunt on the ground as his country is constantly attacked by this force of nature and having to deal with what does that mean for me as a soldier
Mm-hmm.
and what does it mean for our country? Is there a reason why this monster keeps coming? It's pretty good for a comic book about a giant radioactive lizard. So
Nice. That sounds really cool. It sounds kind of like a comic book version of like Godzilla -1.
yeah, a little bit,
Yeah.
I mean, it's more comic booky
Mm-hmm.
than those, but it has a similar.
Yeah.
It's asking similar questions. So.
Nice. I love that. That's a great pick. I, for my second one, am going to recommend an album. So I was thinking of famous bridges in media, and the obvious one that I was coming back to was the bridge that Anthony Kiedis sings about doing heroin under and under the bridge. which is on one of the best albums of all time. So I'm recommending Blood Sugar Sex Magic.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. I take the going weird thing back a little bit. Yeah.
Do you think that was more of a stretch? Just
No. Well, I'm not sure how to feel about that.
who's not
I
thinking
think
about
it's
the Red
great.
Hot Chili Peppers when watching this movie?
I was not. It did not occur to me. That's awesome. And now I won't be able not to. So
I could have gone with much more random bridges. I feel like
well, yeah.
the bridge from Under the Bridges was like a pretty safe bet. Definitely could have gone a lot weirder.
Yeah. I love it. That's awesome. Too cool. All right. So my last pick is another movie, and it's inspired because as we got to the end of Bridge on the River Kwai, I was like, crap, every single named character is going to get killed in this. They're not going to leave anybody standing. And they do. The doctor lives just so he can comment on how crazy things are. But I was like, what's another good movie that I saw that didn't leave anybody standing? And that's kind of about the futility of war. So I'm going with Rogue One, a Star Wars story.
Nice.
So probably the show actually might be a little bit more relevant.
Yeah.
To those themes, but I haven't finished watching season 2 yet, so I'm going with the actual theatrical release. So.
I love that. Yeah, everyone loves Andor. It's apparently it's great, so I might have to check it out.
Season
but Rogue
was awesome.
One is a great choice. I thought that you were going to go with The Departed.
Oh yeah, you could have.
That's the first one that pops into my mind of a movie where essentially everyone dies.
Yep. Or The Killers. I could have gone with The Killers too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Nice. Okay. I don't know how weird I'm going with my last recommendation, but you mentioned is it Clifton, the character who yells madness at the end?
Yes.
So this is obviously a movie about two guys going mad. And I was thinking about what are some of my other favorite movies about guys going mad. And it may be something that I've recommended before. And this is really just like a descent into madness in all of the best ways possible. I'm recommending The Lighthouse, one of my favorites, which might say some troubling things about me if that is one of my favorites, but I love that movie.
That is a movie that rewards multiple viewings.
Yeah.
I bounced off it the first time, mostly because I was like, am I getting this? This movie has so many obvious layers and I don't know if I'm seeing half of them sort of thing, that I didn't even see the comedy the first time. And I'm like,
I was
watching it the second time.
The first time I saw it, I was like, I am going crazy right now. I love this.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's fun.
That's awesome. Is there a possibility that all of the characters in Bridge on the River Kwai are actually in Nichols' head?
Oh, wow. There is that possibility. I doubt it, but
yeah, probably not.
It's a fun exercise for every movie. There's probably a cracked.com article out there about it. From when they were a thing. Great recommendations.
You too.
Great movie.
Awesome.
We crushed it. Bob, before we get out of here, we mentioned on the front end that you're still rocking Fear Flashback Fridays, but is there anything in particular with Fear Flashback Fridays or anything else that you're working on at the website that you want folks to be aware of or check out?
Well, you mentioned at the top of the show that we're doing action movies as the theme for this month. June is action month at ScreenAge Wasteland. So we're going to be doing action horror movies on Fear Flashback. So I've done a bunch of those already. So actually I'm like digging for some stuff. So if you get any recommendations, let me know. But and then we've got all of these top 100 action movies, that list has started today.
Yeah.
So got a bunch of those. I actually hauled my brother Jeff in to help do some write-ups for greatest action heroes and greatest action movie villains.
Nice.
So that's going to be a family affair. Plus everybody else that's joining in on those
Yeah.
lists. Those lists are always a blast. So it's been a while since we've done a theme month, so I'm digging it.
Yeah. It's very fun. I know Best Action Movies is up and running now, so that's already started. And excited to check out Heroes and Villains this month for movies to stream. It will be all action movies, and I think because our Mission Impossible franchise, ranking the movies in that franchise was such a hit, I am going to run it back this month for the Fast and Furious movies.
Oh,
So
nice.
be on the lookout for that ranking that action series. I don't know that there are too many other action series that I'm well versed in enough to rank, but I think that's the one that we'll be on the lookout for
Yeah. Yeah.
at
That's
some
going to be
point
awesome.
in the next couple of weeks. But otherwise, other than that, still trying to crank out some reviews when we can, and then we've got the Canon coming at you
Canon.
every Wednesday. So next week we will be back with a movie that I don't think is an action movie, Black Narcissus or Black Narcissus, however you want to pronounce it. Don't think there's a
No.
whole lot of action there, so trying to tie it into Action Movie Month will be a little tough, but it should be fun. We'll have Jacob and Sailor on for that, which should be a great conversation. So we're looking forward to that as we start to wrap things up for season 5. And we'll take a little break, and we'll be back. But we don't have to talk about that now.
Right.
Let's focus
I
on what
kind of
we
want
have
to.
here and
Yeah.
now. Bob,
I
thank you again for
kind of want
joining.
to. Sorry. So I just kind of want to somehow find a way to condense Black Narcissus into a throwaway line so I can dismiss it for sailors. Just
Yeah,
as he dismissed Bridget, like, oh, it's about a bunch of nuns in Tibet going crazy. Who
yeah,
cares?
that's
You
it.
know.
Who cares? Yeah. We should do that every week. We'll have someone dismiss the the next
The
movie
next one.
so that
I like it.
whoever's on has to defend it. Because all these movies are essential in all of their own special ways.
Yeah.
So we'll be back next week talking about that. Bob will be on in a couple weeks to talk about Stand By Me. So don't want to miss that one. Don't want to miss next week. Catch us on the website proper, talking about action movies and all that fun stuff. And we will see you on whatever feed it is that you're catching us here now. And in the meantime, we'll see all of you lovely folks, as always, in the wasteland. Bye, everyone.